It's the Believe in Texans podcast, and that was as much fun as I've had watching a Texans game this entire season. And truth be told, it's the postseason. Maybe that's why it was so much fun. But this was a 7-6 ball game headed towards and into the fourth quarter, and then everything just opened up. The floodgates opened, and everything that I was worried about in this game, except for one small thing, turned out to be worrying for naught. Because the Texans defense was at its pinnacle. Some of the things that they showed where there's some of their blemishes and warts were towards the end of the season. They hemmed all of that up. They likely ushered Aaron Rodgers into retirement, but FanDuel had the Texans as a 3-point favorite the last time I checked. They end up toppling the Pittsburgh Steelers 30-6. And my biggest takeaway after this game immediately was, man, everything about that team last night was Super Bowl caliber, except the quarterback. It's kind of a big deal in the modern NFL. We'll get to CJ Stroud later. I'm going to spend about the first half of this on the defense because I'm so in love with them. I love those kids so freaking much. I wish I could adopt them all. I'd be their uncle or something. They're everything that you want your football players to be. They're ferocious. They're smart. They are unselfish. And they did a lot of things last night that I know it's Aaron Rodgers and it's a Steelers defense. But remember before the game, no, it's cold. Texans can't win a game. They're a domed team. They don't win on the road. Oh, the Steelers are undefeated since 1991 when playing on Monday night at home, unless you count the COVID year where they lost on a Monday night. But they left that stat out. But they did everything that they've done all season long. And they did it in their style, which was very, very, very swarmy. The areas that I was concerned about before the game, one, the deep shots. You know, Aaron Rodgers to DK Metcalf is a constant menace, especially when the Steelers have an ability to take those shots downfield, even when Aaron Rodgers is getting rid of the ball quickly. They'll spread out into empty. And if he sees that DK Metcalf is one-on-one, he's just going to unleash it. Doesn't have to take a deep drop and take a lot of time. So how does the pass rush get there without Aaron Rodgers taking a lot of deep drops? They did it. They got there. Those guys were screaming off the edges. Guys were coming up the middle. And that was the first time Aaron Rodgers had taken 4 sacks in a game since week 1. Curiously, against the Jets. I got to go back and watch that game now just to see what happened. I'm guessing that was before Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, realized that they really had to be better at getting rid of the ball quickly with Aaron Rodgers and his current age and state of affairs and what have you. But the linebackers in coverage, that was my other big concern. Jaylen Warren and Gainwell, the 2 running backs, not just good running backs, but also very good as receivers with the ball in their hand. You remember early in the game, it's first or second or third play of the game. It was it was a third down on that first drive when Aaron Rodgers comes up to the line. He's doing what he does, diagnosing, seeing exactly what's going on. Toa kind of looks like he's going to blitz. Aaron Rodgers slows everything down, moves Gainwell out of the formation, and he knows, okay, I've got Gainwell one-on-one with Toa. And probably could have had him, except there was either a miscommunication or Gainwell ran the wrong route or whatever it might be. By and large, other than the time that Toa slipped later in the game, they did a great job of, A, covering the running backs, but B, when the running backs did catch a ball, everybody swarmed to it. They were immediately on there, and the tackling was really, really sound throughout. That was an issue early in the season. They've really hemmed that up. There was an issue the last 2 seasons, really. It's one of the things that's taken them over the top this year is how much they've cleaned up their tackling. And the Steelers, who thrived on run after the catch, that was limited to an extreme degree. The Texans, if you want to throw screens and hope for run after the catch, good luck with Kamari Lassiter and Jalen Petrie out there. It was beautiful. The defensive line itself, Danielle Anderson and Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, obviously. If I said Will Hunter at any point earlier, just forgive me of that. I've had very little sleep, but they did an incredible job. It's really hard to get a hit on Aaron Rodgers, and at times some of those errant passes weren't necessarily even because of hits, but it was because he had clutter at his feet. Will Anderson had that one play where he just swiped at Aaron Rodgers' foot as he was trying to throw it, ends up being an errant pass. He did a great job with that. But you get Will Anderson with a half sack, Sheldon Rankins with 1.5 sacks, Danico Autry with a half sack, Derek Barnett with a half sack. And it was a committee affair the same way that these guys have been doing it all season. It was beautiful to watch because when you have a quarterback who gets rid of the ball faster than anybody in the league other than Tua Tagovailoa, it's hard to get a lot of licks on that guy. They did it partly because the coverage was so good behind them as well that Rodgers had to double clutch the ball. The time they down on the goal line when they were supposed to run a screen, a defensive lineman grabbed the intended target, and then Aaron Rodgers, in a complete rookie mistake, doesn't get rid of the ball, tries to extend the play on a screen or whatever that was going to be, a little shovel pass or whatever it might be. That's a rookie quarterback error. These are the types of errors that quarterbacks make and that offenses make when they're facing the Texans defense because they don't have any answers. So on that screen, the offensive line is releasing downfield. If you hold on to the ball at all, it's going to be, you can't extend that play. It's going to be illegal man downfield. I criticized Caleb Williams for that early in his rookie year. Aaron Rodgers is much older and wiser than Caleb Williams. Still, even with Caleb Williams with a couple years experience. But that was a forced error, in my opinion. Did a great job with the pass rush all night long. Obviously, Sheldon Rankins on that scoop and score after Will Anderson got the sack. But Sheldon Rankins, I guess they gave him a half a piece on that. Sheldon Rankins had an incredible pass rush himself on that as well. Patriots right now are 3-point favorites on FanDuel. I'll get into that matchup a little bit later. Am I offended? Do I have a chip on my shoulder? I certainly do. I don't even have to work that hard for this one. We can talk about strength of schedule and everything. It feels too much like the college football playoffs now, the way people are trying to make arguments for and against the Patriots. I don't like it. They're going to play very shortly here. Nice short week here. But we'll get into that towards the end of the podcast. Jalen Pitre and Kamari Lassiter, specifically, I want to talk about those guys because obviously a lot of guys had great games in the secondary. But those guys, they out-linebackered the Steelers linebackers. This is the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is Jack Lambert. This is all of these guys through the years that are just head hammering badasses. And those Steelers linebackers didn't look nearly as interested in stopping the run as tiny Jalen Pitre and as vicious Kamari Lassiter, a cornerback. And those guys are making play after play behind the line of scrimmage. Jalen Pitre had 5 tackles for a stuff or for a loss. Kamari Lassiter had at least 2. And again, going back to, okay, well, what do the Steelers do real well? They throw screens. All right, great. They throw screens. This Texans defense sniffs out those screens, and they get into the backfield before the guy who's supposed to be blocking them even has time to get them in their sights. They're so well coached and they're so smart. And I always try to remember to credit the coaching when it comes to some of the defensive play on this team, because it's tempting at times to say, well, they got Danielle Anderson, they got Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, they've got Derek Stingley, they've got Kamari Lassiter. Of course it's easy. Sure, they've got those guys. Those are young defensive backs. Jalen Pitre and Kalen Bullock, Derek Stingley, and Kamari Lassiter. You've got 4 guys that are still relative rookies, really. I mean, Derek Stingley would be on his rookie contract if they hadn't extended it. Those guys are playing like veterans. Dino Vasso, the defensive backs coach, deserves a lot of credit for that. But on the defensive line, all right, Tommy Togiai, did you think he was going to be your starter at the beginning of the year? Is it as simple as, they got a boatload of talent out there? The guy uses incredible technique. Sheldon Rankins comes in on a $2 million a year, 1-year contract. Henry To'oTo'o, Azeez Elshire, EJ Speed, none of those guys are highly touted. Oh, yeah, of course. Well, it's not like Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw back in the day in San Francisco. These guys are coached to the umpteenth degree, and they get the absolute most out of them. Plug in any defensive tackle that we talked about this year, Mario Edwards, Tim Settle, Foley Fatukasi, who didn't even make it to the season. All of these guys are not name brand items, but they've done an incredible job being part of the in the regular season, number 2 scoring defense in the league. I like that they have that little chip on their shoulder, that they relinquished that right at the very end of the year. But they really probably showed up the most, and where I was most impressed is in undoing some of the mistakes by the offense, and specifically CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud turns the ball over 3 times in that game, fumbles the ball 5 times. They recovered 3 of them, but an ugly interception. But the one fumble that gave the Texans defense an incredibly short field, the Steelers capitalized on it, and I'm doing that in air quotes. I don't know why if you're watching on the stream, it keeps giving a thumbs up. I got to disable that somehow. But doing that in air quotes, they drove 4 yards in 8 plays and had to kick a field goal. This morning, Sean Pendergast on our morning show, Sports Radio 610, the Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610, he kind of joked that, you know what, CJ kind of set the stage for the Texans defense to look as incredible as they were. It's not just the down in, down out things that the defense was doing. It was that they were put in some tough situations. The first fumble, the Texans forced a 3 and out. The second fumble, that's when the Steelers went 4 yards in 8 plays, and then they kicked the Steelers kicked the field goal. That was some balls out, clutch defensive play by this Texans defense. I'm really excited about this week versus Drake May and that offense, who's been very productive. They haven't faced a top 10 scoring defense this entire season until the Chargers game, where Drake May really took off in the second half, but they scored 16 points versus the Chargers. So we'll see. We don't know. Drake May can scramble. He can run. That's been a thorn in the Texans defense side, especially late in games at times this year. Something to worry about, something to monitor. But man, as far as the offensive line goes, and I believe I said that the Patriots are 3-point favorites on FanDuel right now. As far as the offense goes, a lot of good things, a lot of really, really good things. And I'm saying that when I talk about the offense in total, including the good things that CJ Stroud did. But if you look at just the simple box score analysis, if you went into a game and you said, well, the offense had 408 yards, they converted 10 of their 15 third downs. Meanwhile, the Steelers, by the way, converted 2 of their 14 third downs. But 408 yards, 10 of 15 on third down. Only threw 1 interception, and they had 164 yards rushing. You would look at that box score and say, oh, and the Steelers only had 63 yards rushing, and the Steelers only had 112 yards passing. You would think that was a walloping. And a lot of that yardage came in the first 3 quarters. But no, the problem is the 3 turnovers. The 2 fumbles, which were not like strip sack type of fumbles of the conventional variety where a guy gets beat off the edge and takes it off the quarterback's hand. Those were bad decisions by CJ Stroud. And I think CJ was pressing, but a lot of those guys on the offense, and I'll start with the offensive line and then move backwards and outwards. But that was the most complete effort I've seen out of those guys all year long. The run game is light years ahead of where they were last year fundamentally. Woody Marks didn't have a single negative rush, like a rush for no gain or negative yardage in that game. We know how much of an improvement that is over what we saw out of the rushing offense last year. And it was one of those improvements that came so slowly and gradually that you never knew quite what to make of it. The best thing we could say is that, man, they do seem to have a knack for running for those first downs that they really need in the fourth quarter. Some of those things start to click. This was by far the most they've clicked in the run game. 164 yards rushing, where in the regular season, the highest total they had was 167 yards against the Ravens defense that, remember, was mostly local middle schoolers by that time. They were so banged up on the Ravens defense. That was still when they were having a really hard time. So this is 3 yards shy of their season best effort, but much more impressive in the level of difficulty. And with the offensive line, the thing I was worried about going into this game was, man, that Steelers defensive line is exactly the type of players that the previous offensive line, first half of the season or so, really, really struggled with. Big, tough, strong, physical dudes. Cam Hayward's playing like one of the best defensive linemen in the league right now. There's some elements to where, like, okay, boy, the Texans really had a hard time versus Chris Jones. But early on, it was tough sledding. they had to really fight and scrap, and I'll get into the running backs here in a second. But the encouraging thing about it was there was one point early in the game where the Texans were 4 of 6 on third downs, and I just scrolled through to see how many of those were third and manageable. 4 of those third down situations, they were in 3rd and 3 or less. And go back to the Chiefs a couple of years ago when their offense wasn't nearly as high powered as it used to be, but what they were really good at doing was getting into 3rd and manageable, because man, it's so much easier to convert a 3rd and 3. Not to mention these days you've got that option of going for it on 4th. So even if you only get 1 or 2 yards on 3rd and 3, you're still in that situation where you could go for it on 4th down. That's been huge. And that's where I would say, man, the way the rushing offense looked versus the Steelers, that's a Super Bowl caliber rushing offense. Woody Marks and Nick Chubb. Woody Marks got stronger as the game went along. That second drive really is when the run, the first touchdown drive in the second quarter. That's when the run game really started clicking, and they had as surgical a drive as I've seen this season. And in that first touchdown drive, they ran the ball. They were getting short, manageable passes, nothing high risk or anything. They just marched down the field, converted third downs, and there you go. They just couldn't possess the football frequently enough after that. CJ kept turning the ball over too much. But that was the most explosive that I've seen Nick Chubb be since he got here. We've seen it at times. He had that 30-yard run in the Ravens game. He's had some moments, but man, he was hitting the hole hard. He was breaking tackles. He was doing everything that you want him to be able to do in relief of the rookie Woody Marks. The one thing I'd love to see that maybe they can start to add back in the playoffs is Woody Marks as a receiving threat, because I don't believe he had any receptions in the game yesterday that I can remember. And that's clearly that was his calling card coming out of college. Woody Marks, he's targeted once, no catches. So that was great. Woody Marks, Nick Chubb, offensive line, hell yes. Offensive line and pass protection, picking up blitzes, light years ahead of where they were earlier in the season. I'm going to credit Cole Popovich, the offensive line coach, for a lot of this, because he demands a blue-collar mentality, and that's not something the Texans had. And we saw really, as the season progressed, you'd start to see more signs of it, but man, they were preaching toughness and physicality, and they were calling plays like they had more physicality and toughness than they actually had. But I think they're growing into it, and I think they're buying into Cole Popovich as a coach. But fundamentally, in terms of their footwork, the lack of mental errors, the ability to pick up blitzes, they made a lot of growth through the season. And I was hopeful that maybe they can continue to make progress or maybe flip a switch in the playoffs. I didn't expect it to be the degree that they showed versus the Steelers. And you talk about Aaron Rodgers all you want. That Steelers defense has some studs on it. They had some weaknesses on the back end. The Patriots don't have as many weaknesses on the back end. Christian Gonzalez has a concussion, so that'll weaken him a little bit if he doesn't make it back. But he's also got one extra day to recover than Nico Collins does, and we'll get to Nico as well. Christian Kirk had his touchdown, and he had 144 yards receiving. To put that in perspective, all season long, he had 239 yards. That's how big a revelation it was for Christian Kirk to have 144 yards receiving. CJ going to Christian Kirk, being comfortable with him, that's a great development. If Nico's not out there, Christian Kirk and Jalen Noel, who was targeted once and then dropped that ball that he could have had. I mean, I credit the Steelers for a nice pass breakup on that one. It wasn't like an egregious drop or anything, but Xavier Hutchinson, Jaden Higgins could have had a touchdown on that flea flicker. And I've seen some people criticize Nick Caley for calling that play. Look, Woody Marks pitched it a little too high to CJ. The pass protection wasn't pristine, and that's really what kept that play from working. I got to give credit to Caley for the play call, because if executed properly, that's a touchdown, or very likely a touchdown in that scenario. I thought Caley did a good job of getting CJ out of the pocket. I think when he saw that CJ maybe was struggling a little bit, or hearing footsteps, he tried to get him out of the pocket, running boots, running sprint outs, and all of those things. And CJ just misfired on that one easy big chunk play to Nico Collins. That one might have been a touchdown. I'd have to go back and watch that again. But if I covered all the bases in terms of the receivers, yes. Offensive line, yes. running backs, yes. I have no choice now but to address the elephant in the room, which is that CJ Stroud had a stinker of a performance as a quarterback. There is no other way to frame it. Yes, I pointed out that he did some really good things in the passing game at times. But the fumbled snaps, taking chances when he had a muddy pocket, but still pretty sound protection, especially against blitzes. In the second half, I started to get really nervous because he was dropping his eyes. There were times where he was looking at the pass rush. It looked like he had lost that composure. And that happens at times if a guy's getting bludgeoned throughout the game. But I can't blame the offensive line for this. CJ just looked off for whatever reason. Maybe he's got an injured hand and that's making him inconsistent. And then he's got less confidence and he's starting to force or press or make bad decisions. But like he's done a really good job this season of learning when to minimize risk. And that's one of the biggest challenges for a quarterback is when do you minimize risk? When do you just take the sack? When do you throw the ball in the dirt? When do you throw the ball away? I think he's matured incredibly in that regard. For whatever reason, a guy that's had big games in the playoffs before, he's had big games and big time college games before. I don't know what happened to where it would look like he was pressing as much as he did. You know, he talked all week along with others about how you got to approach this like any other game. And barring a physical malady of some sort, the only thing I can guess is that, man, like no young kid dreams of growing up to be Trent Dilfer. With all due respect to Trent Dilfer, but Trent Dilfer won a quarterback by just steering the ship opposite of an awesome defense back in the day with those Ravens teams, with that Ravens team. And in a lot of ways, I think that's the challenge for CJ Stroud right now is you got to accept that if this team wins a Super Bowl, it might be with a more Trent Dilfer-like performance. It doesn't have to come from incredible quarterback play. So I get if that is even indeed the issue, I understand the psychology of that. And maybe that when you hit the playoffs and man, this is everything you dream of as a young player and everything, maybe something got upended right there, but it's got to stop. You can't fumble the ball 5 times. You just can't. If you need a little bit of a perspective on that, at the very least, the last quarterback since 1991 to have 5 fumbles in a victory was Eli Manning in week 16 of 2007. What did the Giants go on to do that year? They won the Super Bowl. Yeah. I'm not saying it's a harbinger of them winning the Super Bowl, but it just put things in perspective that, man, yeah, quarterbacks have stinker performances sometimes. Sometimes they're really sloppy. Sometimes they're really bad. You've got a chance to redeem yourself in a short week. I think at the very least, CJ's not going to turn the ball over in that fashion. He might throw a pick or something, but I hope it's not a really ill-advised pick. And I hope that he's not fumbling the ball simply because he can't handle the snap or because he's trying to get his arm up to throw in a really scary environment with arms and limbs all around him. That was a surprise last night. I know that he can work past that, and he's obviously shown that he's better than that. But I'm nervous. I'm just nervous that if it was any kind of a mindset issue, that he gets that straightened out and hammered out. He was in good. Seemed like he was in good spirits after the game, so it's not like he's overly distraught over it or anything. And I think this will be a good chip on the shoulder. Third chip on the shoulder reference we've had so far. As far as Nico Collins, he was drawing coverage. I thought Aikman did a good job of pointing out that, yes, Joey Porter is traveling with Nico Collins, but it's not like they're just leaving him out there on an island all the time, one-on-one with no safety help or anything. Joey Porter Jr. was traveling with a chaperone, like a young person might travel on an airplane, or they've got people from the airlines helping him out along the way. He's traveling alone, but with a chaperone, and he was drawing the attention away from others. I thought Joey Porter Jr. was getting away with being pretty grabby, which annoys me just because go back to that Chargers game and the officials were being so hyper vigilant about defensive holding. Hurt the Chargers and it hurt the Texans. But can we get some consistency? Can I see Nico Collins running downfield without Joey Porter giving him a tender embrace the entire time? It seems like that should be illegal. I think Nico gets a little bit of the Shaq treatment sometimes where because he's so big, because defensive holding doesn't affect him as much, that he doesn't draw those penalties. If you need to be like a modern athlete and be a little bit more of a diva about it, just go for it, Nico. We love you. We know you're not a diva, but those officials don't. I don't know if he's going to be available. It's hard to come back through all the stages of the concussion protocol on a short week. So with 5 days rest and recuperation in the concussion protocol after what looked like a pretty nasty concussion, I know that doesn't necessarily matter in terms of how quickly guys recover and everything, but that's that natural human tendency to say, man, he did the posturing motion with his hands there. He was clutching his head immediately. It looked rough. Hopefully he comes back quickly from that, not at the expense of his own health or safety, obviously, but that's something we're going to be monitoring all week long, obviously. The New England defense, the biggest thing that would concern me right now is that they've got a pretty stout run defense. So this Texans rejuvenated, or I guess born for the first time, rushing offense that we saw against the Steelers, it's going to be tough sledding to have a performance again like that again. But now that I've seen they're capable of it, they can do it. But that is very much a challenge versus this Patriots run defense. Offensively, Drake May and his scrambling ability, aside from everything that Drake May's been able to do as a passer, obviously, that's going to be a challenge. But the one thing that's been kind of kryptonite to the Texans in various situations this year has been a guy like Bo Nix, a guy like Baker Mayfield, a guy like Trevor Lawrence, a guy like Justin Herbert. I'm missing a couple here. A guy like Cam Ward at the end of that Titans game. Those guys have been able to scramble for yardage in the second half or in the fourth quarter. That's either been lethal to the Texans or made things dicier than they need to be. Remember Trevor Lawrence with that long scramble when they've got a kicker who can kick it 70 yards? That's dicey. So that's the thing to watch out for and think about as we look forward to this Patriots game. But awesome game. I've had very little sleep. I don't know if I'll sleep tonight either. So excited about being in the playoffs. I just don't know if I can grow respect. If they keep this run going, I'm going to try to get this playoff beard looking real scraggly and an inch or two longer by the time they get to the Super Bowl. Thank you to Believe for sponsoring the Believe in Texans podcast, and I'll see everybody later this week.